Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm making this video for books that I have read this year. Basically, I'm just going to list them, and this video is more like of a reference for myself to look back to like if I want to remember what books I read in 2024. I didn't make this video last year, but really this year is the year that I got into like reading, really. And this year, before this year, I feel like I'd read books, but like most books I would just like read the start and then I would never finish them. And unless it was like a really good book. But this year I started like finishing more books and reading more books. So this year I read 12 books that I want to share with you guys what they are. So I'm going to list them. I don't have all the books. I actually only have one book with me right now that I read this year. I did not want to go get them all from the library, and three of the books were actually not even physical books. They were one was a play away that you would get from the library and you like listen to it with headphones. One I read on my phone on Hoopla, and one I listened to on my phone on Hoopla. So three of them were not actual books, but either way, I'm gonna put pictures on the screen of the books that I mention in the video, and let's get started. So I have a list right here, so I'm going to be reading off this list. First book, this was probably one of my favorite books I read this year, was Becoming Odyssa, and it was about a young woman who hiked the Appalachian Trail. And, I've been hiking the Appalachian Trail, section hiking it, and I really enjoyed reading about someone's story of through hiking it. And so that was really a nice book. I really liked that book. The next book is, this is a series of 3 books, The Wild Robot. So there's 3 books in The Wild Robot. It's The Wild Robot Escapes, and The Wild Robot Protects. I actually have one of them. This is the only book that I have out of all the books that I read. And then The Wild Robot Protects is the book that I have right here. And you guys can see. I actually just finished reading it recently. The reason I read these books is because The Wild Robot, it was a book club at our school. And we went to see the movie of The Wild Robot. If you guys didn't know, the movie came out like in the fall. So we saw that, and then I wanted to finish the series by reading The Wild Robot Escapes and The Wild Robot Protects. So this is the only book that I have with me out of all the books I read this year. But that was a series that I enjoyed. And yeah. The next book is called The Whole Sky. I'll put it right here. It was just a book based on a true like thing that happened in Kentucky. It was about like a girl with in a horse farm, and this like disease that went around with horses in a certain timeline. And so it's based on a true event that happened. And so it's kind of like historical fiction, I think is what that kind of book is called. And that's kind of my favorite type of book. Historical fiction is like based on something that actually happened. So that was number 5. Number 6 is the Wishtree book, about a wish tree. It was a nice story, a cute story. I don't know, I just liked it. And then the next 2 books, number 7 and number 8. Sorry, I have these all in a different, I don't know if you guys can see, but they're all in like, I had to number them because they're not in order of like the books that I read. I don't know. But I read another book that was for our book club at school called Wonder. And then so we read it, and it was a book club. We were going to watch the movie, but we haven't done that yet. We might do it in the new year. I'm not sure. And then there's a sequel to Wonder, and it's Auggie Me. And so I read both of those books. Auggie Me I listened to on the play away thing from the library. And then there was another book that I read on my phone on Hoopla, Inside Out and Back Again, about, it was for school, but not a book club. It was about living in a time of the Vietnamese War or something. I don't know. It was like about this girl's like journal, and she was writing about what was going on in that timeline. So it's kind of historical fiction as well. So that was a nice book. It was a pretty short book. And then Mary Ingles on Her Own is the next book, number 10. One of my favorite book series of all times is the Little House on the Prairie books. We read them when I was younger. My dad would read all of the books to us, including the other series that follows it, the Rose series. And so there are like a few books that are separate from the series that we have read, and one of those is Mary Ingles on Her Own. And so it's just a book about Mary starting college, and yeah. So I like that book. That was based on a true story, so yeah. And then number 11 was A Nest for Celeste, and it was just a cute story about a mouse. And then number 12 is The Birchbark House. I got recommended The Birchbark House by a facilitator at our school because I like the Little House on the Prairie books, and so she thought I would like it, and I did. It's basically about a family who are the Native Americans who lived in a similar time as the Ingleses, the Little House on the Prairie books. Anyway, so that was the last book that I read this year, The Birchbark House. I like that story. It was historical fiction as well, so you guys can tell that I like historical fiction. Historical fiction is probably my favorite. But then the Wild Robot series were about like books, not books, events that might happen in the future, which is also cool. So I'm not like stuck to one genre of books, but I will say my favorite is definitely historical fiction. And again, before this year, I never really, I like nonfiction too, but historical fiction is really cool. And before this year, I never really like got into reading a lot of books, but the books that I did read were historical fiction. Like Anne of Green Gables, which I need to read the rest of that series. I know that's a series. And then the Little House on the Prairie books. Historical fiction. Well, I guess the Little House on the Prairie books are historical nonfiction. I don't know. Some of it is true. Most of it's true, and some of it's made up. So, yeah. Those are the 12 books that I read this year. I have a whole book list for next year, so I will definitely be making this video at the end of next year. I hope you guys got some, whatever you want to call it, ideas, book ideas, for books that you might want to read this coming year. And yeah, with all that being said, I will end this vlog. I will see you guys next time. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and yeah, bye friends.